Waverly Hills Sanatorium sits on a hill outside Louisville, Kentucky, and even in daylight it looks like something that was never meant to hold light. Built in the early 20th century to house patients dying of tuberculosis, it grew from a small wooden structure into a five-story brick complex holding hundreds of the sick and the dying, at a time when the disease was consuming lives faster than doctors could keep records. Some estimates place the death toll inside those walls in the tens of thousands over the decades it operated, though the exact number was lost long ago in fires and flooded basements and years of neglect. What is not disputed is that the building has a tunnel, long and sloped, running from the main structure down into the earth toward the road below, built so that the bodies of the dead could be moved out of sight of the living patients, who might lose hope if they saw how many left the building only after they had stopped breathing. Staff called it the body chute, and it is the first place any visitor's imagination goes cold. Reema had heard the stories long before she ever set foot in Kentucky. She worked as a paranormal researcher, freelance, the kind of woman who filmed her investigations for a small but devoted audience back home, translating American hauntings into the language of her own culture, comparing a dying tuberculosis ward to the abandoned Havelis she had grown up hearing about, where restless souls were said to linger because no one had performed the proper rites for them. She flew into Louisville in early autumn, when the trees around the sanatorium had gone the color of rust, and checked into a motel a few miles from the building, telling herself she would sleep early and start filming at first light. She did not sleep early. She lay in the dark, scrolling through old records of the hospital, floor plans, patient logs, the notorious room 502 where two different nurses were said to have died under mysterious circumstances decades apart. One by hanging, one by falling from the roof, both after periods of behavior the other staff described as erratic, as though something in that room had reached into their minds and turned the key. The next evening, she arranged a private tour with two members of the small crew that maintained the property, a caretaker named Wallace, who had worked there for 11 years, and a younger assistant, Priya, who filmed for Reema and carried the extra batteries. Wallace warned them before they went in. He said the building did not like to be filmed after dark, that equipment failed for no reason, that voices came through recorders that had never been switched on. Reema had heard 100 caretakers say 100 versions of the same warning, and she smiled the polite smile of someone who has stopped being frightened by warnings and has instead learned to be frightened only by evidence. They entered through the main door as the sun dropped behind the ridge, and the temperature inside the lobby felt at least 10 degrees colder than the air outside, though no one could explain why, since the building had no working heating or cooling system left. They moved room to room on the lower floors first, Reema narrating quietly into her microphone, describing the peeling paint, the rusted bed frames still bolted to some of the walls, the windows painted over decades ago to keep dying patients from seeing how close the town lay, just beyond their reach. In one long ward, Priya's camera caught a flicker of movement near the far wall, a shape that might have been a curtain moving in a draft, except there were no curtains left in that room, only bare brick and broken glass. Wallace did not react. He had seen it before, he said, and it never came closer, only watched. They reached the fifth floor near midnight, and this was where Wallace grew quiet, in a different way, the easy talkativeness draining out of his voice. Room 502 sat at the end of the corridor, its door slightly ajar, and even the flashlight beams seemed to travel slower through the dark inside it, as though the air itself resisted them. Reema stepped through first. The room was small, plain, nothing remarkable in its bones, just a square space with a single barred window and a floor stained dark in one corner that no amount of cleaning had ever fully lifted. She had begun to speak into the microphone, describing the two nurses, the dates, the official explanations the hospital had given at the time, when Priya's camera light dimmed to almost nothing and then died completely, though the battery had been full 20 minutes earlier. In the sudden near dark, Reema heard breathing that was not her own, not Wallace's, not Priya's, a slow, rasping breath like someone drawing air through lungs that had given up most of their capacity long ago, the exact sound she had read, described in old medical accounts of the disease that built this place. She told herself it was the wind through a broken pane. She kept telling herself that even as the sound moved unmistakably, from the corner with the stain toward the doorway where she stood, passing close enough that she felt a change in the air against her arm, cold and faintly damp, like breath from a mouth that had not tasted health in a very long time. Wallace's hand closed around her wrist and pulled her back into the corridor, and only once they were 3 doors away did the battery in Priya's camera flicker back to life on its own, the screen showing full charge as though nothing had happened. None of them spoke as they walked the length of the fifth-floor corridor back toward the stairwell, and it was there, near the top of the stairs, that Reema's own recorder, clipped to her jacket and running the entire time, picked up something none of them had heard with their own ears. She did not discover it until she reviewed the audio back at the motel, long after they had left the building, long after Wallace had shaken her hand at the door and told her, without any of his earlier warmth, that most visitors did not come back for a second night, and neither should she. The recording was mostly her own voice, footsteps, the occasional creak of old wood. But beneath it, faint, layered under her narration in room 502, was another voice, thin and dry, speaking words she could not make out at first, and then played slower, played twice more. She understood it clearly enough to stop breathing herself for a moment. It said her name, not a generic word, not static mistaken for speech, but her actual name, Reema, spoken the way someone might speak the name of a person they had been waiting for, a long time, in a room with a stained floor and a barred window, in a building that had learned, across all its years of loss, exactly how to keep something of the dying inside its walls long after their bodies had gone down the sloped tunnel and out into the dark. She did not go back for a second night. She flew home 3 days later, and to this day, when she plays that clip for her audience, she stops it before the whisper comes, and she never explains why.